Hey guys, Buildzoid here, and this is going to be a video just going through AM4 motherboards and me sharing some of my thoughts on the various AM4, like B550 and X570 motherboards. Mostly because I have a lot of people just sending me questions about, like, yo, Buildzoid, what's the best motherboard for my 5950X or 5800X or 5600X or 5950, like, you know, any new Ryzen CPU. And I'm just sitting here like, you're asking the wrong question. Because if all you really want to do is run the CPU, you can go and buy, like, you can go and buy, where is it? Not that. Oh, this thing. Yeah, you can go buy this. And this will run your 5950X. It'll even do some pretty decent PBO overclocking, because PBO is really weird. It never goes over 200 watts. Like, it just hard walls at 200 watts. And it does that on the 3950X as well, where it's just like, if you set up PBO, for whatever reason, it just seems to have some kind of problem going over 200 watts. I've never seen it go over. Like, even if your temperatures are low, it doesn't go over 200 watts, which is interesting behavior, especially considering, and the funniest part is actually the performance changes, even though the power consumption doesn't really change at all as you fiddle with the power and current limits. So yeah, that AMD's algorithm is a very strange thing. Anyway, so yeah, if you just want a motherboard that'll run your CPU, this will do it. Now, I do need to sort of make this video not compete with the motherboard roundup that I did for Gamers Nexus. So yeah, we're going from the top, and I'm just gonna share my thoughts on the various boards as we go through them. So let's just start with the Gigabyte X570 Aorus Extreme. Out of the stupidly priced motherboards for people with too much money, this is still my favorite one. Mostly because, like, this one, and it still doesn't make sense to buy this board, but unlike some of the other ones at this price point, it makes slightly more sense. So you get 1 gig LAN, you get 10 gig LAN, you get Wi-Fi 6, tons of USB ports, which I'm a fan of. Also, this is the old revision. If you buy the board now, you're actually going to get the new revision, which has a new memory topology, which is better at memory overclocking. And it is actually a pretty significant difference. So if we look here, right, and we go to the specifications, you'll see that it's... Oh, and this is my favorite part. So Ryzen 5000 BIOSes aren't even remotely finished right now. So it's like DDR4 5100 with 5000 series, but DDR 5200 on 3000 series, because Gigabyte has had more time to, like, dial in the memory settings for third gen, and 5000 series AMD is messing with the AGSA, so stuff is just constantly getting broken, which is pretty great. There's a BIOS version for the B550 Aorus Master which wouldn't run below CL18 for high frequency memory kits, which was really funny. Anyway, so yeah, so this is the revision 1.1, and you know, third gen goes up to 5200 APUs. Where is it? Oh yeah, so the third gen APUs. Oh man, I hate AMD's naming scheme. So Zen 3, which is 4th gen Ryzen, is the 5000 series, right? The APUs, which are 3rd gen, so like the 4750G, that's 3rd gen, 3rd gen Ryzen, Zen 2. And it's just like, can you not do that? Anyway, yeah, so you'll see like 5400, 5200, 5100. Now, if you have my revision of the board, so I have a revision 1.0. Yeah. Also, it looks like they... Oh, and the 3rd gen APUs aren't even listed. So yeah, that's fun. Though I've not actually, like, I've actually gone over 4400. It's not quite that bad, but I guess there's a chance that some of the later BIOSes just completely broke the memory overclocking. Because early on, the QVL for this board was actually, like, for the revision 1.0 actually went higher on frequency. So I guess later BIOS updates screwed up the memory overclocking. And it doesn't really matter if you're only running, like, XMP settings, which is done in this frequency range, right? Like, that's even if you're on 5000 series, you're going to be running it. Well, okay, that's not confidence inspiring. Well, I will see. I have a 5950X, and I'll probably end up running it in the Extreme, or will I? Because technically I could also run it in the Godlike. Oh well. Anyway, so yeah, the 1.1 is just way better at memory overclocking. Because it does have a different memory topology. Anyway, so yeah, so like if you're looking at this picture on PC Part Picker and then you buy the board and you don't have those two capacitors, that's because you have the new revision and the better memory topology. So most of the reason why I think this board isn't completely stupid, well, it is completely stupid. It's $700, but it's not quite so bad as some of the other boards in this price range. Where is it? Is because you do get 6 SATA ports on this one. You do get 3 M.2 slots, which admittedly you get... Actually, I don't think you get that on the Formula. But then the Formula is like a really, really overpriced version of the Crosshair 8 Hero. So if you buy this, you're just like, this is a terrible... Like, just don't buy this. If you tell me you bought one of these, I'm not impressed with your purchasing decisions. Also, fun fact, all of the cover on all of this is plastic. Okay, just by the way, that's all plastic. So I don't even know how this board can be so expensive. Because, yeah, like it's $600 and like, what, did they pay $200 for the, well, it's an EK water block, so I guess it is $200. So yeah, you have a $200 VRM water block on your like that's what it is. Because Crosshair Hero, now the Crosshair Hero is really overpriced as well. This thing's supposed to be $360. But yeah, so this would have, like, if this was actually going for the price it's supposed to be at, this would be a reasonable board. But the Formula is basically a Hero, but with like $300 worth of water block on it. And by that, I'm being sarcastic. The water block is not worth $300. Also, the VRM doesn't run hot enough to justify water cooling at all. So this is basically a waste of $300 because you could just buy this instead. And this does the same things for much less money. Actually, I think the only difference is that, yeah, so this gets 2.5 gig, whereas this gets 5 gig. Which, again, is just kind of dumb because you can get $500 boards with 10 gig. 10 gig LAN built in. So, yeah, this is a really stupid motherboard. I still don't... Like, this would make sense if it was like $450. For $600, it's dumb as hell. Anyway, because that way it would just be a Hero plus $100 for the water block. Anyway, so... Back to the Extreme. Yeah, this kind of does a little bit of everything, right? You get the 10 gig LAN, you get your 3 M.2 slots, you get your 6 SATA ports, you got your dual BIOS with the switches, so it's not the really stupid version. You get SLI support, so X8 on the PCIe slots, which does mean you can run 5 M.2 SSDs on this motherboard if you want to, as long as your GPU isn't absolutely ridiculously massive. Because I think Gigabyte actually has a GPU that'll cover up the 4th PCIe slot, which is where this is located. So yeah, that wouldn't work with that card. What else is there? It has a postcode. So yeah, this is like, of the stupid like $500+ motherboards, this is the one where I'm like, like if you don't want to figure out what you want your motherboard to do, this one kind of does everything. So yeah, if you have tons and tons of money and absolutely no time at all to make decisions, yeah, sure, go for it. Otherwise, it's not a sensible board at all, especially since most of its functionality... Also, right now, it's super overpriced. It's supposed to be $700 by MSRP. Anyway, let's move on to the Godlike. Man... Like, the Godlike, I'm actually a fan of the PCIe slot layout on the Godlike. And then the rear I/O is just such a disappointment. Like, this is bad even by, like, if I had a $150 motherboard with this for the rear I/O, I would still complain. Especially because that's like killer 2.5 gig LAN. Right? Like, it's like... Like, at this price point, the 10 gig... Because the way MSI actually gets around the 10 gig problem is you get a 10 gig add-in card, which is just like, so what you're telling me is if I want the same level of functionality as, you know, an Aorus Extreme, or what I find hilarious about it, or say a Creation, right? Like MSI's Creation motherboard, which is cheaper. Yeah, if I want the same level of functionality as we get on the $500 Creation, I need to give up one of my PCIe slots, which is completely stupid considering like a core feature of this motherboard, in my opinion, is having this PCIe slot layout so you can have, you know, like a GPU, like you can run 3 GPUs off of the CPU on this. Now, that's not really a reasonable use case, but there are certain people who need a lot of PCIe lanes for like capture cards or something, and this is great for that. This is absolutely perfect for that kind of application. But then it's like, oh yeah, well, you know, if you also want 10 gig LAN and all of those capture cards, no, go buy a Creation instead. And then also there's just not enough USB ports. Yeah, so I'm kind of annoyed by that. Other than that, this is a solid motherboard. Like VRM's good, overclocking's good, has dual BIOS, BCLK buttons are pretty fun, though the X570 chipset makes BCLK overclocking really painful because you have to use an M.2 SSD. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's like, well, some M.2 SSDs get like corruption if you run the PCIe too fast, so it's just like that still doesn't solve the problem. Though I don't know if that is still an issue going through the chipset or not. I would assume it is, because the Sata ports probably drop out because the entire chipset gets overclocked. So I would assume if you use an M.2 SSD, at some point the VCLK is going to be so high your SSD drops out, regardless of if it's Sata or M.2. Whereas if you're on a B550 chipset, I don't know when the SSDs start dropping out because I've not gotten to that point yet, which is a good thing, right? So the VCLK OC, like this is a really neat feature. It's on the wrong chipset though. So yeah. So this board, and also, you know, you get 3 M.2 slots, 6 SATA ports. So this board, I guess if you can live without USB ports, then this is fine. But I just feel like for $700, the only reason in my eyes to get this motherboard is the PCIe slot layout, because this is unique. Like you can't get another X570 motherboard with this arrangement of PCIe slots, and there are certainly situations where this is useful. So yeah, just a shame about the rear I/O. So anyway, moving on, and I've complained about that on the Godlike every time I have to talk about the Godlike. But it's just like, it's just what, like, it's such a minor thing in my opinion, where it's like, how did you, why, what? Look at this. Obviously MSI gets it. This is a good rear I/O. This is a great rear I/O. This is like exactly what should have been on the Godlike. But instead it's only on the Creation for for like $250 less. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of what MSI did here. Now this thing's actually worse overclocking wise because you don't get the dual BIOS, you don't get the BCLK buttons, which is fine. This is a like Creation. It's supposed to be like a workstation board. VRM is still very capable, but this is on a 6-layer PCB instead of an 8-layer PCB. And I think, if I remember correctly, with MSI, the layer count actually makes a bit of a difference in terms of overclocking. Though I'm not sure how that works with the newer boards. So that's something I have to still check. Like, it's been a while since I've last run the Godlike, and the BIOS updates always just shuffle like behavior around so much. Is it just me, or is every motherboard vendor's website just awful? Like, this is not the worst, but it's pretty bad. Admittedly, I do have the browser zoomed in a bit, so anyway, no, I didn't want the Godlike. What did I want? Oh, no, I did want the Godlike, because I wanted to take a look at, like, MSI's QVLs for the boards. Support. Where is it? Oh, there's compatibility. Just go 3000 series, because that's the most mature, and 5000 series might get better or worse with BIOS updates. So, supported speed. And did I break it? Oh, no. Oh, so they support up to 5000 on the 6-layer PCB. Oh, well, yeah, it's... Of course it would. That's that. So that, I believe, is Micron. Actually, no, that's just Rev E. That's not even Rev B. Or, yeah, no, that's Rev E. Because that's 3.31. Oh, no, 3.31. Wait, that's Rev B to, what? Oh, I guess I guess Micron sells the cut down Rev B to Corsair then. Because, yeah, that's... Like, otherwise that doesn't work. Like, you can't have 3.31. Because the 3 is... And it's a 16 gig kit. But the, like, the 1... Like, because the 1 means it's a B revision memory chip. And regular 8 gigabit Rev B is terrible. So this has to be the 16 gigabit, like, cut down chips. So, that's interesting. Anyway, let's take a look at the Godlike for comparison. So with Gigabyte, it's kind of funny, but basically all of the 6-layer boards and the 8-layer boards clock about the same in terms of memory. Or almost exactly the same. Or exactly the same in some cases. Okay, so it looks like MSI's in that situation as well. Where this QVL is exactly the same. Or... Oh no, there's a slight difference. There's B-die going really fast here. Or... No, there's 2 kits of B-die instead of just 1. Well, whatever. So not really much of a difference. So memory overclocking-wise, this should be about the same as well, considering that the QVLs look the same. And the thing is, the QVL isn't like the super reliable way of figuring out which motherboard is the best at memory overclocking, but for a given vendor, it's a good way of getting an idea of like how the motherboards compare to each other in, like, say, MSI's lineup. So, anyway, yeah, so I rather like this board. As far as like the sort of ridiculously priced X570 boards go, I rather like this one. You know, rear I/O is completely loaded. This is as good as it gets. And then you still get, I think, 3 M.2 slots, or is it not going to tell us? No, just 2. No, I'm pretty sure there's 3. Like, I think there's one hiding under there. So let's take a look at that. Or is it just 2? Anyway, so yeah, this video is going to be... Oh, well, it's like a replacement for the AM4 motherboard discussion live stream that I ended up having to throw away because the browser auto-suggested my personal email. Actually, we should just go look at the spec. Oh, come on. Specifications. So M.2 slots. Oh, just 2. Now I feel less bad about one of the decisions I made for the motherboard roundup I did for Gamers Nexus. Because I was pretty sure this was on 3 M.2 slots, but no, it's on 2. Built in. Now, admittedly, you get an expansion card, right? You get the expansion thing, but you're giving up PCIe lanes for that. So maximum number of M.2 SSDs you can get on this is like 4. Yeah, so this tops out at 4, even with a PCIe expansion card, assuming you still want a GPU. If you give up a GPU, you can go higher, but then, like, you're not going to have display output at that point, because this doesn't support, like, this doesn't have an HDMI in the rear I/O, so you're not going to get an APU to just have a stack of SSDs on that. Anyway, so the other sort of, like, board that makes a lot of sense at ridiculous price points is the X570 Creator, which is kind of funny because both of these boards, like, there's not really a bunch of competition in this range. Like, there's boards that cost more that make significantly less sense because of the higher price points, but at $500, you just got the Creation and the Creator, and depending on what exactly you want, yeah, these both make sense, because the Creator is also 10 gig, 1 gig, but it also adds Thunderbolt 3, and then you get BIOS flashback, whereas the MSI board has clear CMOS, but no BIOS flashback, which is actually a really weird trade-off. Because MSI, like the rest of MSI's lineup, does have BIOS flashback, so yeah, kind of wacky. Anyway, this also gets Wi-Fi 6, of course. There's less USB ports, but a lot of people don't care about having a bajillion USB ports as much as I do. What else is there, right? You get 2 M.2 slots on the board itself. 8 SATA ports, though, which is kind of like, if you need a lot of SATA drives, that's pretty neat. postcode, power button, reset button, clear CMOS. Memory overclocking wise, I believe this is on the same topology as the X570 Pcie. So you're better off getting like a MSI board or a, revision 1.1 or 1.2 gigabyte board for memory overclocking. But again, like that's not really a concern with a board like this, right? This is for workstation people. So it's like, like pushing your workstation to the limit is running like 3600 CL16 XMP on 128 gigs of RAM. And it should probably do that just fine. Also, this motherboard's on a daisy chain. Actually, basically all of the... I'm not aware of, at this point, of any T-topology AM4 motherboards. There's still this, like, issue that I did a Gamer's Nexus video about the ASRock X570 Pcie, where the video I was doing, like, the PCB breakdown that I did for them with that board was using an engineering sample PCB that had a T-topology layout. And it's just like... And then the retail boards are all daisy chain, and so I still get people going like, oh yeah, I got T-topology on my Pcie, and I'm like, no, that's a mistake, because that's an engineering sample board that had T-topology, and then ASRock, switched over to daisy chain just like everybody else. Because the thing is, if you're going for high capacity with Ryzen, like, it doesn't really get affected in the frequency range where 4 memory sticks run kind of regardless, like, anyway. Right, like if you're just maxing out your FCLK, 3800 on 4 memory sticks on a 6-layer daisy chain isn't that hard to do. Now, 3800 on 128 gigs of memory, actually, funnily enough, also isn't that hard to do. The most difficult memory configuration to run right now for like high capacity is 4x16 Samsung B-Die, because B-Die is a really obnoxious memory chip to run. Right? So, like, that's why you'll notice that, like, the super high frequency validations, that's all Micron memory chips, not B-Die, because B-Die's super, like, B-Die can clock insanely high, but your memory controller can't keep up with it, basically. And so, yeah. And the funny thing is, so 64 gigs of B-Die, very, very hard to run. 128 gigs of Micron, easier. And I've tested that, like, it's a pretty major difference. Like, you can run the 128 gigs of Micron, like, up to 4,000, maybe a bit over. Whereas with B-Die, like, 3,800 is kind of a struggle. Anyway. So, yeah, the Creator makes sense mostly for the Thunderbolt 3. If you don't care about that, then, there's cheaper boards that'll do most of what the Creator does. Mainly the X570 Pcie. Anyway, Crosshair 8 Hero. Unfortunately, the Dark Hero is, like, not in stock at all. Which, like, it's not in stock in the US, it's also not in stock in the UK, but... So I'm a bit annoyed about that, because I really wanted to get, start, like, test that board, but... Oh well, I have other stuff to work on anyway, so... I'm not really in a rush to get to it. Anyway, Crosshair 8 Hero. So as far as I know, the Dark Hero is supposed to be straight up more expensive. Like, I'm pretty sure this board is supposed to be, like, 400, whereas this is 350. I don't believe they have the same MSRP. And the thing is, between the two of them, so from as far as I know, this has a better memory topology and is way better at memory overclocking. Like, from what I've seen, this seems to be basically comparable to, like, Gigabyte Revision 1.1, 1.2 boards and MSI's motherboards as well. Whereas from talking to people who, like, the thing is, I've never had a chance to mess with a Crosshair 8 Hero myself, but other people I know who do have Crosshair 8 Heroes generally top out around 4,600 on Samsung B-Die, whereas, like, a Revision 1.1, 1.2 gigabyte board will top out around 4,800. And MSI can also kind of do 4,800. Which actually, with MSI, kind of depends which specific board you're looking at, but yeah. So the old Hero, like, this is slightly worse at memory overclocking. The VRM is slightly worse, though it's irrelevant, the VRM difference between the two. Like, this is on 90 amp power stages, this is on 60s, and in the real world, that just doesn't mean anything, because you're never going to have a CPU, like, you're never going to put a CPU in this that's going to max out the VRM on this board. So, like, yeah, the VRM on this is more expensive, but it's not actually going to make a difference in terms of, like, lifespan or longevity of the motherboard. So that's not, in my opinion, a great reason to go for the Dark Hero instead of the regular Hero. Like, mostly I would go for the Dark Hero because this adds the some like non-stat, like the dynamic, like what's it? I don't remember what Asus calls it, but they have a function where your CPU can actually switch between the boost algorithm and a static overclock on the fly, which is really cool. Like, I do think that's really cool. I'm not sure that it's like gonna make a significant performance difference in day-to-day usage. Like, for benchmarking, well, I wonder about that. Like, if you were doing a multi on ambient, I think it would be an advantage. On on like extreme overclocking, I don't think it would make a difference. But hey, if you're, if you're into tinkering with your daily system, um, then, that is a cool feature. Like, that's the main reason I want to get my hands on this board, to play with that. And then also the better memory overclocking. So, yeah. Um, it's kind of the thing. Has postcode, power button, reset button. The main downside to this motherboard at this price point is that both of them, I believe, only have two M.2 slots. Now let's go through Asus's terrible website. I really dislike the Asus, because the thing is just like, I don't, like, why do we have, like, so we have a super high-end B550, super, like, high-end X570, and yeah, like, that's super high-end B550, because I'm tying the tiers to the chipset, not the actual price point. Anyway, B450F, which is like a B450 board, which is all that we really need to say. And then we have the Zenith 2 Extreme Alpha. Like, these are not very related at all. I guess they might be ranked by which ones they sell the most. No, this only released, so I guess, yeah, I have no idea how these are ranked. It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, the regular Crosshair 8 Hero definitely only has 2 SSD slots, which I think is, like, I think that's low for the price point, because the other $350 boards, you're looking at, like, the Meg Ace from MSI, which has 3. You're looking at the Master, which has 3. You're, like, for $270, there's the Pcie, which also has 3. And then you have the Asus boards, which have 2. It's just like, and I personally don't care that much for M.2 SSDs. I actually preferred the Asus configuration of having a bunch of Sata ports. If I was building a daily system, I'd much rather have more Sata rather than more M.2. But, wait, where did the Dark Hero go now? I'm getting super distracted during this video. Oh, well, it's basically like the live stream at this point, because the live stream was also a horrible mess. Oh, there's the board. Oh, wait, and we have the unfinished version of the website. Of course we do. Storage, 1 M.2, 1 M.2, 1 M.2. Yeah, so there's only 2 M.2 slots, which I think is not enough for the price point. Because for comparison, right, those are both like $350+ boards, which the full website for the Dark Hero is actually on like rog.asus.com. Like, you have to go to the ROG site, which again is just super stupid as far as I'm concerned. Like, don't split up your... Well, no, actually, it's fine to split up your sites like that. Like, Gigabyte has aorus.com, I think. But what's really stupid is when your main manufacturer site doesn't have the full product page for your motherboard. This is pretty stupid. Anyway, yeah, so if we look at, like, the Ace, which also I don't think the Ace makes any sense, mostly because, like MSI made the Ace, and then they made the Unify to kill the Ace. Because the Unify is literally the Ace, but one of the LAN ports is missing. And I'm serious about that. This is the exact same board. Like, the PCB is the same. The only difference is this LAN port is missing, and then everything else is the same. And this is, like, what is it? Way cheaper. Oh, actually, the Ace Unify is missing a bunch of RGB, but I don't count RGB, so it's the same board. So anyway, but yeah, so this is $370, similar price to the Crosshair Heroes, right? And admittedly, you only get 4 SATA ports and a postcode in the wrong location. But you do get 3 M.2 slots, which, as I understand it, a lot of normies care about having lots of M.2 slots. Otherwise, MSI wouldn't have decided to make the Unify with 4 SATA ports and 3 M.2 slots again. But yeah, so, it's just like, yeah, so this has more M.2 slots. This can go up to 5 SSDs total, like 5 M.2 SSDs total if you just buy an add-in card for your, PCIe slot. Same is true with the Unify. This also has SLI. You can see the PCIe switches on there. And this is a really solid motherboard. In fact, I would consider this the default, well, like, this is the optimal X570 board in a way. In a way, I consider this like the optimal X570 board. It's really good at overclocking. I like MSI's BIOS a lot better than, well, basically everybody else's at this point. Because the thing is, and what I mean by that is I think MSI does a better job of organizing the BIOS options than everybody else does. Like, they're in a reasonable order. They're not scattered in like sub-menus and buried somewhere out of the way, which like is the biggest problem with Gigabyte is just like, go find the FCLK setting on a Gigabyte board. Right? Like, that's always fun with Gigabyte. It's just like, where's the FCLK setting? Well, it's not in the overclocking tab. But why isn't it in the overclocking tab? Yeah. Anyway, so MSI doesn't do that kind of stuff. Though, admittedly, sometimes when new settings get introduced, they're initially missing from the main overclocking menu. But MSI is pretty good about like not, leaving stuff disorganized for too long. Whereas Gigabyte's BIOS seems to just they clean it up and then it slowly devolves into a mess again as more and more feature updates come out. So yeah, anyway, Unify is really great because it's literally an Ace but cheaper. So I don't see a reason to get the Ace other than if you want the 1 gig, and I believe that's 1 gig Intel and 2.5 gig Killer, whereas this is 2.5 gig Realtek. Actually, this might be 2.5 gig Realtek on both for the 2.5 gig. I can't remember right now. No, the Unify is awesome. I'm a big fan of the Unify. Actually, let's go to specs. Okay, so 2.5 gig Realtek along with a 1 gig Intel, and this is just 2.5 gig Realtek. So, yeah, depending on if you care about, not having an Intel, like, depending on if you care about having the extra LAN controller, the Unify is just way more cost effective. Because it is like $70 cheaper right now. Right? $369 all over here, and then for this you're going to be paying $299. Yeah, so it's like $70 cheaper. So that's a lot. Anyway, and then you have the, where is it? Master, which also is 3 M.2 slots, right? You can see them clearly right there. And the Master also has multiple revisions. Like, that one has even more revisions. Now, I've been hearing some rather horrible things about various, like, BIOS issues with, like... But the thing is, like, I've been hearing about, like, the BIOS issues... Well, not BIOS issues, like, issues with the Master boards just randomly not posting eventually. And the problem with that is that it seems that that goes away if you leave the board unpowered for long enough or something. Like, if you remove the CMOS battery is one of the fixes I've heard. And it's just like, yeah, I'm never going to run into that. Because the B550 Master is supposed to also have that issue, but it's just like, I don't leave the board plugged in long enough, often enough, for that to, like, happen to me, I don't think. So that's one of the just fundamental flaws of just trying to test, like, review motherboards is just like, unless I, like, commit to running a motherboard for, like, a year in an actual system, is like, I'm not going to know how it's reliable in the long term. Right, like the only thing I can do is just assume that there's not going to be issues, and then when they crop up, then deal with it when they show up. Which, yeah. So, and also, I'm not sure how widespread that issue is, because there's a lot of people who apparently don't have, like, evidently don't have it. But I have definitely heard about this board and even some other Gigabyte boards having an issue where they just stop booting for no reason, and then if you remove the battery for like 10 minutes or something, they start working again, which is very, very weird. And also just like, I don't know how you'd even pick up on that. Anyway, but feature set wise, of the sort of $360 motherboards, which actually the Master right now, yeah, of the $360 motherboards, the Master is basically my favorite. And the reasoning for that is simple, because it does have the crazy memory overclocking support. So we're just gonna, yeah, like crazy memory overclocking support, right? 5200, 5400. So same as the Extreme on that. And that's on the revision 1.1. I don't remember how let's check the revision 1.0. I haven't looked at that in ages. Okay, so that's the same as the Extreme. Yeah, so that's the thing is like with the Gigabyte boards, the 8-layer, like this is a 6-layer PCB and, same same memory overclocking capabilities according to Gigabyte as the 8-layer version. Anyway, so yeah, really great memory overclocking support. It does have the dual BIOS switches, right? Got the switches, has a postcode, power button, reset button. You even have voltage read points. 6 SATA ports. There's a Thunderbolt header if you wanted to add a Thunderbolt card. Actually, I can't remember if the Unify has that. I don't usually pay a lot of attention to the, what I consider exotic connectivity options. Like, the only things I care about are USB ports, PCIe, and SATA. Because SATA SSDs are fast enough. The only thing that doesn't use a regular USB port in out of, my devices is my phone. And ultimately, the charging cable for that is still Type A to Type C. And yeah, so it's just like Type A USB and SATA and PCIe. Only things I care about. So actually, I think it would be easier to just go through the specs, wouldn't it? And see if we have... Apparently no Thunderbolt. Yeah, so I guess that's a unique feature to Gigabyte boards. Actually, I think ASRock might also have that as well. So yeah, this has a really cool, out of the sort of $360 boards, I really like the feature set of the Master. It has the most features. Unfortunately, I'm also the issue I've heard with the battery thing is just that's concerning. But again, I don't know how widespread it is. I don't know how common it is, right? And, at least, and it sounds like you can fix it by just removing the battery. And hopefully, it's something that Gigabyte can just put out a BIOS update for, and it'll go away. So yeah, so that's kind of that. I really love the feature set on this board. I think because you get a solid VRM, right? You get all the overclocking options that you would really want. Solid memory overclocking capabilities, very solid memory overclocking capabilities, and you get your 3 M.2 slots. Which admittedly, you can't use all the M.2 slots at the same time as all the SATA ports. That's just a limitation of the X570 chipset. And I don't think you can use all the PCIe slots at the same time as all of the M.2 slots either. But yeah, at this price point, I don't think you're gonna... Well, the thing is, the feature set of this board is actually really similar, and the same is true for, the Unify. These boards all have, one major flaw, which is that the Pcie exists. The X570 Pcie. Now, the X570 Pcie, which actually, that's one thing I forgot. I do like the rear I/O on the Master. A bit more than, say, on the Unify. Mostly because there's more USB ports. So yeah, but the problem basically all of the sort of $360 boards have is that the Pcie exists. And just from a connectors perspective, this is the best, right? So you've got oh man, I just realized that I made a horrible mistake in the Gamers Nexus roundup video. This is $300, not $270. I shouldn't have to research the price points. They should just come up on screen. That should be edited into the video afterwards. So that you can have the price points be as accurate as possible and not misled by... Because the thing is, the Pcie was at $270 for a week or something. So I thought they just shifted it down permanently, but no, it was on sale. No, that's great. Anyway, yeah, so this has 8 SATA ports, which is more SATA ports than the Master or the Unify and it's the same number of SATA ports as the Hero, right? So this is as many SATA ports as you can get, but you can also get the 3 M.2 slots, so you have as many M.2 slots as you can get. Now, admittedly, you can't use all the SATA ports and the M.2 slots at the same time, but, if all you care about is having the option to later down the line decide, hey, do I want more SATA drives, or hey, do I want more M.2s, well, this is the best for that, right? Because you have the option, you have the choice of both. Internal clear CMOS button. There's also a clear CMOS in the rear I/O as well, right? Clear CMOS, rear I/O, Wi-Fi 6, 1 gig LAN. So this is one of the downsides to this board is it does only have 1 gig, whereas like the Master has 5 gig and one. Actually no, it's 2.5 and 1 gig on the Master, and then you have like 2.5 gig on the Unify, and then 2.5 gig, 1 gig on the Ace from MSI. But you know, like if you don't plan to get upgrade to 2.5 gig, then that doesn't affect you. Or if you don't like, if you either you yeah, if you don't have 2.5 gig and don't plan to upgrade to 2.5 gig anytime soon, that doesn't really affect you. So yeah, I don't like personally, I don't find that very concerning not having 2.5 gig. But anyway, okay, number of USB ports. I wish there was more USB ports, but this isn't as bad as it could be. Like it's not quite on the level of only having 5 Type A's, right? Which is what the Godlike has. Anyway, oh, and you still get like SLI support, so you get X8, X8. So you can have 5 PC, like you can have 5 M.2 SSDs on this board with an expansion card. Same is true for the Unify as well, but you know, yeah. So this is sort of the most flexible motherboard. The main issue I have with it, compared to some of the other motherboards in this price range, is the VRM on this is weaker than on say the Unify or the Master. Not that that's going to affect you. You can still overclock even a 5950X on this. Manually, not just PBO. PBO tends to top out a little bit low on the power draw, but manual overclocking, you can definitely go, you know, up to around 250 watts. Past that, I don't think you're going to be, like, past 250 watts, I don't think it's possible to be in, like, safe voltage and temperature ranges. So, up to 250, and this will still handle 250 watts, that's not a problem. It'll just, you know, handle it at a slightly higher temperature depending on what kind of airflow you have in your case. But memory overclocking wise, this motherboard is much, much worse than a lot of the other boards at this price point. But then again, it's like for day-to-day usage, right? If your goal is to run 3600 CL16 XMP on anywhere from 16 gigs of RAM up to 128 gigs of RAM, well, you're not going to care about that. That doesn't matter. That's not going to affect you, right? But yeah, if you are like, if you're buying an X570 board just to like if you overclock motherboard, like if you overclock RAM for the sake of overclocking, which in my opinion is the most enjoyable way of overclocking RAM, this thing's going to annoy you. It's really not that good at memory overclocking. So yeah, like, so that's kind of the thing. It's just like, you know, if you're into overclocking for the sake of overclocking, MSI or Gigabyte or the Dark Hero, or I guess, does Asus have a, like, refreshed, similarly $300-ish board? Not seeing one right now. Also, I wanted to talk about the B550 Vision D, which right now is super overpriced on Amazon, but we'll get to that. Anyway, so Pcie, like, it has all the features. It doesn't really, like, as an overclocker, I don't like it. Also, I don't like, well, ASRock's BIOS is nowhere near as bad as it used to be, and arguably, it's less of a maze to navigate than Gigabyte's BIOS at this point, because like the FCLK is actually in the main overclocking tab, which I know that sounds really nitpicky, but it's like, if, you know, if I think about trying to help somebody who's like overclocking for their first time, and it's like, where do I find the FCLK setting? Well, on Gigabyte, that's like, you go to the AMD CBS menu, then you go to NBIO, if I remember correctly, then XFR enhancement, and there you're going to find your FCLK settings. Whereas on ASRock, you just go to the overclocking tab, and I believe it's right under the memory settings. So, you know, BIOS on this is now better organized, and they don't have the stupid confirm inputs thing anymore. So it's actually pretty quick. Like, my biggest problem with ASRock boards was always having to confirm the input on anything, on the older BIOSes, which that's not a thing anymore for like over a year now. And so, yeah, that's actually perfectly good. Like, so now ASRock's BIOS, the thing is, you still occasionally find settings in ASRock's BIOS that don't work the way they're supposed to. And ASRock does still have a habit of, like, defaulting settings without telling you. So, like, if you, so B550 Steel Legend, if you go over a certain memory ratio, it'll set a bunch of subtimings for you. And the worst part is, it sets them incorrectly. Like, it doesn't even set them to values that are good. It sets them to bad values that don't post. And I'm just like, are you kidding me, ASRock? Why? Just don't do that. You know? It's a lot like Gigabyte and dual BIOS on their lower end motherboards. Just don't. So similarly with ASRock, it's just like your BIOS would be better if it did less stuff. If it like just get the core features functional and then don't, like if I wanted the motherboard to change memory timings for me, implement like some kind of memory profile thing. Don't change my subtimings when I change the memory ratio. That's dumb as hell. Right? Because it's like I, as the user, am choosing to change the memory ratio. I am not choosing to change the memory ratio and the timings. I don't like motherboards that think they know what they're like. That motherboards that think they're smarter than me. And there admittedly are motherboards that are definitely smarter than me, but they still don't like fight me over it. Because if a motherboard is smarter than me, that means like that's the boards where if you leave the settings on auto, it does a better job of overclocking than if you try to change them. Right? That's when a motherboard is like, okay, you're smarter than me. I admit you're a better motherboard than I am. But motherboards where it's like you leave the set, like you punch in a set of values, and then the motherboard overwrites them when you change some other option. It's just like, yeah, don't do that. Then just don't. But ultimately, that's a super nitpicky thing, and it also only happens above, like, I believe the 48x ratio. So you're not going to be affected by that if you're, a reasonable person staying at 3600 to 4000 megahertz on your memory. So, yeah, like, ultimately, this board got my recommendation in the Gamers Nexus Roundup because it's like, well, Gamers Nexus audience is primarily normies. So... Not quite so normie as, say, Linus Tech Tips, but normies. And for normies, this board is perfectly fine, even though I don't really like it very much. Because the thing is, they're not going to go try to smash memory frequency records. And, yeah, for memory frequency records, I'd rather have a 6-layer Gigabyte or an MSI board, or even maybe a Dark Hero or a ITX Asus board or an ITX, well, ITX Gigabyte as well also works. I'd rather have one of those boards instead of an ASRock. Though, actually, ASRock's B550 motherboards seem to have new memory topologies. I wonder if they did the Razer. I don't think they did or did they? Specs. Okay. 4666. Really? Memory. I really want to know if they... Because, like, a lot of the motherboard vendors, like, they're taking the Wait, are they kidding me? What? Why would you do this? I mean, I've complained about ASRock overstating their QVLs in the past, but this is like the opposite direction. This is like, or did they just not test anything yet? What did I click on? Okay, that's 5000 series. What about 3000 series? 4600 as well. Thing is, I can't tell from the photo on the website what the memory layout looks like. Like, I'm trying to tell if the traces look the same, because this looks like they have a ground fill. And I'm pretty sure this didn't have one. Like, I think the traces on this one, because that's like the biggest difference between, say, like MSI has ground fill over all of their memory traces on like basically all of their boards. And that's the biggest difference between a revision 1.0 and a revision 1.1 motherboard from Gigabyte. Like, admittedly, the thing that everybody notices is like, ooh, the capacitors are missing. But no. The capacitors are completely irrelevant to the fact that you can't see any of the memory traces because they're under a massive ground plane. And it's just like, and I can't tell if they're doing that with this. Like, this looks like the memory section is smoother, right? Like, so this might have a newer, better memory topology. Or it's just a Pcie with Razer-enabled heatsinks. Anyway, which admittedly would be the easier thing to do. But the thing is, because for the B550 boards, as far as I know, yeah, B550 boards have a new topology. So it's like, why wouldn't they just copy-paste that onto the refresh X570? Yeah, I think they even did that. Yeah, this looks more similar to this than it does to this. Ooh, I wonder if they have like an I wonder if you buy a retail X570 Pcie right now, what memory topology do you get? Because it might be better. Anyway, so that's kind of annoying that it's hard to tell, but yeah, so B550 Pcie, that's another board we'll look at. Anyway, so X570 Pcie, I still like, for normie users, the X570 Taichi still has the most connectors, and there's nothing I can, nothing else I can say about that. X570i Asus. Good rear, well, yeah, solid rear I/O. You got BIOS flashback. There's no clear CMOS button, which is kind of annoying, because you would get that on the Unify and the Taichi. Okay, I guess we're gonna go to Asus's website for this one, because it's not going the way I wanted to. And X570. So E. So yeah, you can see all the memory traces on this one. You get color-coded troubleshooting LEDs. The postcode is in just like the worst possible location on this board. Like this is the actual. Okay, no, that's not true. I've seen some motherboards, but like not on DDR4, but on there are DDR3 motherboards where the postcode is like in between the PCIe slots, which is like, okay, no, that's actually worse. But this is about as bad as it gets for postcode positioning. Like, why would you put the postcode down here? I will never understand. Like, there are actual cases where, well, no, there's also the X570 Ace, where the postcode is positioned that if you had a long PCIe card, a long PCIe card in the second slot, you won't see the postcode. Like, put the postcode where it won't get covered up by various expansion cards, which basically means nowhere in the lower half of the motherboard. This whole area is off limits for postcodes as far as I'm concerned. Because it's just like, you're going to put something down here and it's just going to cover it up. Also, I think there's cases where the motherboard, like, I think the O11 Dynamic kind of does this, where if you put a radiator in the bottom of the case, you could end up covering up the bottom PCIe slots. And then you won't see the postcode at all, because there'll be a radiator in front of it. So that postcode location, and actually bottom edge postcodes are just, in general, a thing I'm not a fan of, which the Unify does do, and the Taichi does that as well, but... Oh well. Anyway, so... You get 8 SATA ports, I guess. You get 2.5 gig and 1 gig. So I guess if you care about better networking, this is a better option than the Taichi. But you do only get 2 M.2 slots on this instead of 3. Overclocking wise... Oh, wait, let's go to tech specs. Oh, wait, what? Yeah, that's not confidence inspiring, going only up to 4400, but that doesn't surprise me because we can see all the memory traces in the photos. Right, like that's basically a straight giveaway that, okay, this is probably not going to be the best overclocker, because all the best clocking motherboards, you can't see the traces at all, because they're covered up, and that helps with the signal integrity for reasons that I'm not going to try to explain. So, I mean, like, I don't see anything fundamentally wrong with this board. I just don't think it's the most cost-effective option at this price point, unless you really want an Asus motherboard. In which case, like, well, you don't really have other choices, do you, at $300? Unless, where's the B550 XE? Is that also not on the list yet? I guess that's one of those boards down here. Because I think the B550 XE is supposed to be 300-ish. Which is just, like, I don't get why you would make a $300 B550 motherboard. Like, it makes so little sense, because you don't have... Like, if you actually want a bunch of M.2 drives, right? X570, the chipset, spits out more PCIe lanes for M.2s, so you should get, like, a Taichi or a Unify or, you know, one of those boards. Anyway, so we did the X570E... Oh, Phantom Gaming X. This is a recolor of the Taichi with an extra LAN port. That's what that is. So I accidentally skipped over that, but I guess I should talk about it. So, Phantom Gaming X. So, it's a Taichi with an extra networking port, and that networking port is 2.5. Yeah. So that's kind of that. So that board makes... I guess, well, no, because you could get the X570E from Asus instead. That's cheaper. Unless you really want the 3 M.2 slots. Like, this is the thing with choosing motherboards, is like, it's very conditional. It's like, well, I want 2.5 gig and I want 3 M.2 slots, but I don't care about having like no 1 gig. You have the Unify, right? Or you have the X570e if you don't care about the miss, or if you do want the extra 1 gig. If you want 1 gig and 2.5 gig, then you have the X570e, but then you can't have the 3 M.2 slots. Or you can go for the Phantom Gaming X, where it's like, okay, now you can have the 3 M.2 slots and the 2.5 gig and 1 gig networking. So yeah, X570. Ooh, we skipped over this, which we shouldn't have done, because so at the MSRP for this board, this is still my favorite ITX. At the price that it ends up at because of supply issues, not okay. Like 340 is way too much. But the thing is, this is the best VRM that you can get on an ITX board. Just straight up, this is still the best VRM you can get on an ITX board. Because when Asus, for some reason, when they did the B550 ITX, they downgraded the VRM from 70 amp smart power stages down to 50 amp DRMOS components. And that's a pretty massive downgrade. Like, that's not a very small downgrade at all. So it's just like, and the B550i, what's most disappointing to me about that downgrade is the B550i is actually a better memory overclocker. So it's like, so you can't have one board that does everything. And both of those boards actually, from the memory overclocking perspective, have one fundamental flaw where you can't change the VTT DDR voltage in a useful direction. Oh, interestingly enough, the memory layout, you can still see the memory traces on this. Though I think that's an exception for the 2DIMM boards. Or at least some of the 2DIMM boards. Because like Gigabyte's ITX board also has visible memory traces, and that one's also like very good at memory overclocking. The B550 ITX. So yeah. But this one has a downgraded VRM, which I'm just so disappointed about. Because if this was on the X570 VRM, this would just be like the coolest little B550 ITX board ever. And instead it's just kind of like, well, it's really good at memory overclocking. As long as you don't want to do anything else, it's fine. Yeah. Because the other thing is like from a, say, oh, and there's no gallery for this. Do they have a picture of the rear I/O? Connectivity, right? Okay. Yeah, and this is just worse rear I/O than what you get on the X570i. No, that's not the X570 one. But like this thing has for an ITX board, the rear I/O on that thing is really solid. I hate how you, actually, can I choose? No, I can't choose 2 chipsets at the same time. Why would I want to look at 2 chipsets that support the same CPUs? Seriously. Freaking motherboard vendors and their websites. Where's the I? There. So yeah, that's the thing, is like the rear I/O on this thing is really solid for an ITX board. Actually, I think it might be the best rear I/O of any ITX board on the AM4 platform. Right? Admittedly, that's 1 gig LAN, whereas on the B550 you get 2.5 gig, but well, if you don't care about that, this is just better. You get more USB ports and Wi-Fi 6. Whereas, like, I put way more weight on the USB ports than on the networking, which, I don't know, maybe some people do it, like, I assume some people care more about the networking than the USB ports, but yeah, I very much prefer USB ports. So I'm a big fan of the rear I/O of this, and this rear I/O is just like, wait, does that only have 4 USB ports? Yeah, so that's awful. That's just straight up awful as far as I'm concerned. Like, at this point, it should be coming with a USB hub as part of the accessory package. Anyway. So I guess we've gone over the B550i at this point, and the X570i. So these are both boards where it's like, I wish they had proper VTT DDR control. Also, they're both limited to 1.8 volts on the memory, because Asus used capacitors that won't take more than 1.8 volts. So if you actually volt mod these, you need to desolder the caps, or you might blow them up. Which is really like premium ROG motherboards that can't take 2 volts on the memory because Asus decided to use slightly... It's like, the thing is, it's not like they couldn't use 2.5 volt caps. They could have, but they didn't. And actually, my favorite part is the X570i, the entire output filter of the VRM Like for the V-Core, 2.5 volts. Memory, 2 volts. Just like they had to spec a different capacitor for the memory section of the board so that they could do that. So that they would have a 2-volt cap. Because if they just used the same ones they use for the entire rest of the power delivery for the CPU, it would have been 2.5 volts. But no, 2. So, yeah, not very impressed by that. So we've gone over the X570 B550e Gaming. So this board's really, really cheap in the UK right now. Like right now I could go and buy this for like 190 quid, which is absolutely insane. Like that's a really good deal. And I've, like apparently in a lot of Europe, this board is currently really cheap. Like I've heard from somebody in Germany that apparently there it's like 200 euro or something, which is insane. But in the US, it's 270. And at 270, I'm not a big fan of this board. Rear I/O is okay, I guess, right? You get 6 USB ports. I would have preferred more, but anyway. Wi-Fi 6, 2.5 gig LAN, Realtek, of course, BIOS flashback. No rear I/O clear CMOS, which is kind of like, at this price point, you probably could have had that. You get a postcode in the worst possible location, or at least one of the worst possible locations for a postcode. VRM's good. So, you know, but the thing is, like, if all you care about is the VRM, like, we could literally go all the way down to, where is it? Wait, no, that's the regular Pro. Pro P. You could literally go all the way down to this thing. And this has 1050 amp power stages for V-Core. Like, this'll... Well, 5950X might be a little bit borderline, but other than that, like, this is plenty powerful. Which is the thing, is like, and like, if you wanted a motherboard that comfortably runs a 5950X, where it's not like, you know, depends on how much airflow you have, that kind of thing, then you're still only looking at like $180 at most. You can go lower. You can go for like the B550 Aorus Elite. So this is 1250 amp power stages. Like this is going to power a 5950X just fine. And this is $160, under $160, right? So yeah, that's kind of the thing, is just like, if all you want is a VRM capable of powering your CPU, you can go really cheap. Really, really cheap. And if you're not, like, if you're just doing PBO, you could even go as low as like the B550A Pro from MSI. Right? Like, and technically, if you throw enough airflow at this VRM, it'll even do static overclocking, right? Like that's the thing, is just like so yeah, it's just like worrying about the VRM for even a 5950X just doesn't make sense unless you're like, well, it kind of makes sense, but it does not. Like, if you're doing constant heavy renders and you're manually overclocking, then yeah, worrying about the VRM is actually reasonable. Otherwise, not reasonable at all. Because you now have motherboards, because there are motherboards where like a 5950X at stock starts like power throttling because the motherboard power delivery is garbage, and that would be something like this, right? Like this right here, trash. This will actually make your 5950X slower. This will underclock your 5950X, even at stock. But you know, but now we're looking at like $100 boards for a $750 CPU, which is just like, it doesn't make any bloody sense. Or wait, it's $750, isn't it? I can't remember right now. Anyway, so yeah, like I wouldn't worry too much about the VRM on the higher price boards because it just doesn't matter. So B550E, the coolest feature on the B550E, oh man, there's a lot of boards. Like, why can't I see it already? Because we need to scroll up more. Yeah, so the B550E, the coolest feature on this motherboard is that you do get SLI support. So you get X8, X8. And you also get 6 SATA ports. Actually, I kind of like this board. I mean, other than the rear I/O. But I think I can probably live with 6 USB ports, right? The funny thing is, like, I'm wondering if I can live with 6 USB ports in the rear I/O, and my current motherboard already has a extra USB port add-in card. Because actually I have multiple USB port add-in cards. I have like a 5 1/4 inch SD card and USB port thing. And then I also have 2 extra 3.0 ports, all of, like just coming off of the motherboard for the rear. Admittedly, my case doesn't come with like front panel USB ports, so that's part of that. But that's part of why I need so many in the back. But yeah, it's like I'm not sure. I think my current board only has 6, so I would probably be fine if I switched over to something like this. Which, again, I'm thinking like European prices, because in Europe, this thing is so cheap right now. Like, in the US, it's a $270 board. Here, it's like $200. Which, admittedly, after conversions. But the thing is that all of our motherboards, if you do if you just do the conversion and then add tax, all of our motherboards are like 20% more expensive than their US price, or 25% more expensive. Depending on which country exactly. But, basically, I expect a motherboard to cost the US price, but in pounds. Because that's normally how it works out anyway. Like, that's just how the retailers do it. It's like a 270 US board is going to be 270 quid. Yeah. Anyway, so this, like, the thing is, so the main argument to get this board instead of, say, a Vision D, right? Because that's the other board that's a B550 that offers SLI support, so X8, X8 PCIe slots, which you don't just need to run SLI. Like, it's like you could have more M.2 SSDs. You can have four M.2. You can have 4 M.2 SSDs with this. You could have what else could you do? You can have if you have capture cards that need to be connected to the CPU, or some other crazy high bandwidth thing that has to go to the CPU, can't go through the chipset. Well, the B550E and the Vision are some of the few motherboards that support that. I think the B550 Pcie also does it. Where is the B550 Pcie? Like, it should be pretty expensive. Like, if I remember correctly, that's a pretty expensive board. Where did it go? Is it out of stock? It's probably out of stock. Or heavily discounted. Oh, so I guess Asus decided to massively discount in Europe, and ASRock is doing it in the US. Because yeah, this is a $300 board, and right now it's $260, and then there's a rebate. So yeah. Anyway, so yeah, these are like the few boards that support SLI, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure this supports SLI. Or actually, I don't think the Pcie has the SLI license. I'm pretty sure the Asus board actually has an SLI license. Which, the funny thing is, like, you'd need an SLI license, which adds even more even more cost to a motherboard. Because just having the switches would give you X8, X8, but it wouldn't give you SLI support. You need to get an SLI license from NVIDIA to have SLI support, which is pretty stupid, isn't it? But well, when did NVIDIA ever do anything for free? Somebody's going to be like, but they introduced RTX for free. Do you remember how overpriced the 2080 Ti was? I wouldn't consider RTX free, considering that. Anyway, let's check out the B550 Pcie. So, 3-way crossfire. Oh, I don't see any mention of SLI. So that's pretty stupid. I don't think they bought an SLI license for this. And like, crossfire is super dead. And you do get only 2 M.2 slots, which is normal because it's a B550 chipset. You can't get that many SSDs out of it. Yeah, no mention of SLI support. So these guys didn't pay for the SLI license. What about Asus? I'm pretty sure Asus did. Not that I think it like makes a massive difference, but I'm just kind of wondering, like, hey, because I'm pretty sure Gigabyte did. Oh, I guess they didn't get an SLI license then. Well, still, this is cheaper. Did Gigabyte get an SLI license? E550, because now I'm really wondering, because I was pretty sure this has SLI. I guess none of these have SLI then. I was pretty sure there was a couple B550s with actual SLI support. Or I guess everybody just gave up on it because NVIDIA doesn't market it as SLI anymore. So now it's like, which, like the NVLink thing is like NVLink is still, it's just SLI over a new connector. So it's not like NVLink replaced SLI. It's just like, no, it's a new implementation of SLI on a new connector. But man, I am like, I should just use the search function. No mention of SLI. What about NVLink? No mention of NVLink. Fun. What? Why? Oh, okay, so Asus actually paid for the SLI license. Okay, so I was remembering that correctly. So that's, I guess, if you care, if you care about SLI. But the thing is, I mostly care about just having the option of having, you know, X8, X8. I don't actually care about the SLI part of things. The thing is, like, you can't say, oh, this motherboard has Crossfire, therefore it has X8, X8, because Crossfire will run through bloody anything that's at least X4, including the chipset. Badly. Very badly. It'll run. But, yeah, anyway, let's check out the rear I/O on this. Oh, that's not bad. Yeah, that's actually a nice solid rear I/O. The thing is, this is, like, at 230, go for it. Like, yeah, I don't have a problem with this board at 230, especially considering, like, this is on the new and improved memory topology, which I wonder if that's reflected in their QVLs at all. It is. Yes, it is. Ooh, that's the Revision N memory kit. So these you can't buy these. These don't exist right now properly. Like the N right there. So I have a 5100 kit from Crucial, and that has M8FB, which is Rev B, and M8FN is Rev N. So that's like a new and upcoming memory chip from Micron, but it's not here yet. So anyway, that's kind of fun. That's what they have on the QVL. And then weird that they didn't test anything above 4400, but the fact that they can do 5100 at all on anything is just a pretty good sign that like the board can. Because the thing is, like, even with good sticks, 5100 is a nightmare to boot on a lot of motherboards. So this being on a QVL is like, yeah, okay, this is very capable of memory overclocking. Yeah, at 230, you know, if you just want an overclock, like you get a postcode, admittedly not in my favorite location, but you do get one. You get 8 Sata ports, which is a lot for a B550 motherboard. I thought B550 was limited to 6, but I guess you're giving up an M.2 slot for all 8. VRM's solid, right? Like, which again is just like the VRM's kind of irrelevant on most of these boards. So yeah, at 230, this is actually a really solid motherboard. At its MSRP, it's a stupid motherboard. Because like at $300, it's going up against the X570 Unify, the X570 Taichi, and if you're not an overclocker, then you don't care about the fact that this is better at memory OC. Also, the Unify actually would just beat this on memory. Admittedly, you know, 8 SATA ports, but there's also boards like the X570e, right? That has 8 SATA ports. Actually, no, that doesn't do that great of a memory overclocking job either. So, I guess that's such an like that's such a like I need 8 SATA ports and I need crazy memory overclocking support, and that's when this motherboard makes sense. Otherwise, it's just like just get something else at the $300 price point, or get a cheaper board, right? Like you can get boards with 8 SATA ports for much less. Anyway, so that's kind of a wacky board right there. Vision D, I like this, except for the 4 SATA ports, but you get a postcode and in the correct freaking location. This is one of the few Gigabyte motherboards to not have the stupid dual BIOS implementation. So, you know, you won't have the BIOS. Actually, on B550, the only motherboard with the obnoxious dual BIOS is the Master. But on X570, it's literally everything that isn't the X570 Master, which is really stupid. Like that makes a lot of the lower end Gigabyte boards just so annoying to work with. On like when I say lower end, I mean the like basically like I think the Elite gets away with not having it. Like that's the other thing is just like so which boards on Gigabyte like for X570 the Ultra has it. Right? You go X570 Ultra and they don't mention it in their product specs, which I'm pretty annoyed about. Also, yeah, like Gigabyte with their memory topology. Because they retroactively upgraded the memory on all of their X570s, which as far as I can tell, like Asus didn't do that, which is why it's like, yeah, the Dark Hero is a really cool X570 Asus board, and then everything else is like, if you want Asus best memory overclocking support, you have to buy a B550, which is just kind of like, especially since a lot of the Asus B550s are, in my opinion, kind of overpriced, at least at their MSRPs. They're just way more expensive than everybody else's for similar feature sets, which is like, or, well, it's not necessarily way more expensive. Some of them are like slightly more expensive, but a lot of them are also significantly more expensive. Anyway. Yeah, so you scroll down and it's like 128, which is like not a good thing. Because you don't have the switches. So if you fail to post several times in a row, you're going to find yourself on the backup BIOS and be very upset about it if you didn't. Like if you buy a 5000 series and your board comes with a 3000 series BIOS out of the box and you only update the main BIOS and then it kicks you onto the backup, man. You're going to be in for such a great time because the board is just going to refuse to post when it does that. I'm actually pretty sure I saw a motherboard where exactly that happened on eBay, where like somebody was selling the board as like it's a seller refurbished motherboard that got returned to them after it failed to post one day, and then it just stopped posting completely or something. Which I guess it could have been some other fault as well, but yeah. So let's check if this doesn't have the dual BIOS, because that's like the main thing. Is just like Gigabyte boards without the dual BIOS or with the switches are good. And the ones, okay, yeah, so this is 128. So this is fine. This is like nice and safe to buy, but this board doesn't make a ton of sense because this is basically a B550 feature set on a X570 price motherboard, right? Because you get 6 SATA ports, you get 2 M.2 slots. Admittedly, both of them are PCIe 4.0 instead of one of them being 3.0, but if you were on a B550 motherboard, like you can get you get a second M.2 slot, it's just 3.0, which I'm not like, I don't know. I don't care about super fast SSDs. Like, again, I'm still on SATA. So, you know, to me, this is just kind of like any M.2 slot is a good M.2 slot. And actually, I'd prefer SATA ports. But, yeah. So, that's like, Gigabyte's X570 lineup is just like, avoid the dual BIOS boards. Because you just, like, you're going to have to, like, because if you end up on the backup BIOS, you need to, like, power down your whole system, cut the standby power, and then wait for the standby power to drain, and then you could turn your system on again. And actually, basically, if you have a Gigabyte motherboard and it fails to post 2 times in a row, clear CMOS. Like, just clear the CMOS as soon as possible. That way you won't accidentally end up on the backup BIOS. Anyway, so that's hella stupid. Wait, did the Tai... Oh, no, that's the X570 Taichi. X570 PG Velocita. Now, this motherboard is very misleading. Because when I saw this, I was like, ooh, it's got 2 X8 slots. And then you go to ASRock's website. And then have to, like, decipher what the hell, like, new memory topology, which is nice, right? Like, 5000 support. So that's neat. It's a good memory overclocker. Because it's a new board. Like, this is a new X570. But yeah, I got like, ooh, dual X8. And then it's like, no. 2 4.0 X16 slots, single at X16, dual at X16 X4. The second one goes through the chipset. Lovely. Right? So, and the problem I have with this is like, I can get a perfectly good memory overclocker with a perfectly good VRM, admittedly without the postcode, for like 220 instead of what is this 260, 270. Like, oh, and you get BIOS flashback. Well, I can, like, again, I can get everything this motherboard does for less money, and it's just like, yeah. So I'm not impressed with this one. Like, I really don't get what the logic is behind this motherboard. Like, there's nothing super specific about what it does. Then again, I guess a lot of people buy their motherboard based on looks. And I guess, you know, somebody might think this looks appealing, which is fine. Like, I don't actually find this that ugly either. Like, this looks like a perfectly good motherboard to me. Then again, like, well, actually, well, no, this also looks fine. There's not really any... I'm not a fan of tan. Actually, the Pcie boards I straight up don't like visually. That might be why I hate on them so much. Just like subconscious bias, subconscious bias caused by the fact that whenever I look at a Pcie, it's just like those gears. Just like, why? Just, it's a motherboard. Anyway, so yeah, the Velocita is like, this doesn't make sense. Like, it should either be cheaper or it should do more stuff. And it doesn't do either of those things. And I guess the Steel Legend is more of the same. Oh no, this is like worse. There's no way this is actually 260, right? Like, oh, it's from Amazon, so I guess they do not sell like, yeah, no, this is like a $200 board that like is just non-existent right now. But I guess if you want 8 SATA ports, the thing is, like, this has to go up against like the X570 Tough and the low end, like the cheaper Asus boards. And the biggest problem with like Asus motherboards is like on the high end you don't get 3 M.2 slots is like the problem I can see with them. But on the low end they're like very, very competitive. Right, like if you look at the X570 Tough Gaming yeah, like this has 8 SATA ports. Admittedly, some of them stick straight up out of the board, but like it still has the 8 SATA ports, and you get 2.5 gig. Whereas on this, you get 1 gig. VRM wise, this is going to be comparable. So yeah. Anyway, so this one's dumb. X570 Aorus Pro Wi-Fi. I mean, if you want SLI support in the most obnoxious dual BIOS implementation to ever be conceived. The funny thing is, Gigabyte has had this super obnoxious dual BIOS implementation since like at least the X58 days, if not LGA 775. So it's not a new thing. It's just, I don't know how they haven't figured out that it's actually really annoying in so long. Right? Like, why do they keep doing it? And then we have the B550 Master, which is like, we've got the same VRM as the X570 Extreme, which is pretty neat. Like, it doesn't ultimately make a difference in terms of overclocking, but it's still neat, right? You've got three M.2 slots. Unfortunately, 2 of them are connected to your CPU. Actually, all of them are connected to your CPU, which I guess means you can plug in all of your M.2 SSDs and all of the SATA ports. It'll just cut your GPU down to X8, and if you wanted to run anything else off of the CPU, well, you can't. You do get a postcode, but you get the most obnoxious dual BIOS ever. So this board is just like, I can't recommend it. This is just annoying to work with. I really just can't recommend it. It's just so annoying. Same goes for like the X570 Pro, unfortunately. Like solid board, just dumb dual BIOS. Or am I mistaken about that? We should check. Like the Ultra has the dumb dual BIOS. Does the Pro have it? No, I was not mistaken. It does indeed have support for dual BIOS TM. Or obnoxious BIOS TM. So yeah, that's great. So that's the anti-feature effect kicking in right there. Are you kidding me? How do you do that? Where's the reopen close tab? Oh, that's not the tab I wanted to reopen. This one, yeah. I want to be able to go back to the Gigabyte lineup. Anyway, because unfortunately we don't get perfect previews on PC Part Picker, so we're just going to skip over this part, right? That's another Pro, Asus X570 Pro. I think this has SLI support. Oh yeah, it has the I don't know that it has SLI support. It might, but it does have the switches. Actually, I'm pretty sure this does have SLI support because it's X570. So, but the more important thing to me is switches. Freaking PCIe switches, like, yes! So you have X8 support, and this thing is what? This thing's 240. So yeah, that's a really solid option, isn't it? VRM's good, troubleshooting LEDs, and they're color-coded isn't that convenient. You got a power button over here. So, you know, if you're testing the motherboard outside of a case, like, you don't have to jump the pins. Only 6 SATA ports, though. That's kind of weird. Like, Asus is, like, the masters of just chopping off random features to, like, force you into specific motherboards, right? Because, like, the Tough Pro, 8 SATA ports. The regular Tough Plus has 8 SATA ports. And then you get the X570 Pro, 6 SATA ports. Like, shouldn't the more expensive motherboard just do more everything? Why does it do more SL, like more like PCIe slots, but less SATA ports? So yeah, that's like the peak Asus right there, where it's just like, okay, well, if you want the 2 X8 slots and 8 SATA ports, you have to buy like an X570e. Which is just like, okay, Asus, I get it. You want me to spend $300. Or I guess you could get for... Actually, no, you couldn't, because this only has 6 SATA ports as well. So yeah, it's just like, yeah, you want 8 SATA ports and 2 X8 slots? $300. Thank you very much. X570i Aorus Pro. This board, like, is just... This doesn't make sense to me. Just get the B550 version instead. Like, you get the same VRM. You actually get a better VRM heatsink. Similar rear I/O. Actually, I think better rear I/O because you get 2.5 gig instead of 1 gig LAN. And better memory over... Actually, no, I think the memory overclocking is tied. But still, it's just like, it doesn't... This one's like $50 more expensive. Doesn't do anything extra. MSI X570 Tomahawk. A very solid VRM attached to... You know, a motherboard. Like, it's not a bad board. It just doesn't really make sense to me as an X570 too much, because you get what? 2 M.2 slots, 6 SATA ports, right? So that's not really... It's not really that impressive in my book. You do get troubleshooting LEDs, but you don't get a postcode. VRM is great, though. Like, you do get the... Like, the VRM on this is great. Good memory overclocking support. The rear I/O is not a complete disaster, right? BIOS flashback, but the thing is, BIOS flashback is present on like every single Gigabyte board. The only vendor where it's kind of rare is like Asus, and they've corrected that on actually Asus and ASRock. BIOS flashback is a bit rare, but you know, Asus fixed that with the Tough Pro. So it's like this I think is the most direct comparison to the Tomahawk. And it's like, well, this also has 2 M.2 slots, and it still has the troubleshooting LEDs, and a perfectly good VRM. I think the Tomahawk's VRM is, like, technically better, but in practice, I don't think you would notice a difference. I'm assuming they fixed the memory topology, right? Let's go. Oh, can I choose 2 chipsets now? Oh, I can! Awesome! Okay, so... X570 Tough Pro. Where is it? There it is. I'm really wondering. Ooh, I've already been on this page. Specs. Because this should be on a 6-layer PCB, so unless they're copy-pasting the same PCB that they had. No, yeah, it's 5100, so this is a new memory topology. So this is actually like, this is a good, really solid alternative to the Tomahawk, actually. So... And they're priced about the same. So here, I'm going to say pick your poison. Right? Like, between these two, I really don't see a difference. I don't think they're the most, like... Or wait, where is the Tough Pro? Actually, no, the Tough Pro's down here. 220 versus 236. Oh, so this is just straight up cheaper. And... I think it had 2.5 gig. At which point it's just like, which I think the Tomahawk also has. Like, the thing is, these are both X570 boards that don't have the dual X8 PCIe slots. So yeah, this does have Intel i225, so that's 2.5 gig. And it has BIOS flashback. So yeah, this is just like, this is just kind of better than the Tomahawk at this point. From a normal, well, no, I think just straight up, I would consider this better than the Tomahawk. As far as I know, the Gaming Pro Carbon Wi-Fi has like the VR. No, that's the B550. The X570 Carbon is the one with the super hot VR. Well, not super hot, but way hotter than it needs to be for the price point it's at. VRM, right? Like it's 230. The Tomahawk has a better VRM. I don't think the Tomahawk has a worse feature set. Like that's the thing is just like, yeah, I can understand sacrificing some VRM performance for a better feature set, but if you're not doing that, then just get the board with the best VRM. So yeah, this board is just kind of like, eh. Just pretend that it doesn't exist as far as I'm concerned. Oh boy. Yeah, so this is literally going to replace the live stream at this point because it's an hour and 30 minutes. It's a shame you can't like search through videos, right? Like CTRLF a certain phrase to see at what part I talk about your motherboard of choice. I guess I could have released this in parts depending on price points. Like I could have done a block of like ultra high-end motherboards, mid-range motherboards, low-end motherboards or something. The thing is like the problem I have with doing it that way is if you do it that way, then somebody who's already convinced that they need a high-end motherboard is going to just look at the high-end motherboard video. And my goal is like, when it comes to choosing a motherboard, in my opinion, you should always go for the motherboard that does everything you need for the lowest possible price. Which, like, unless you've made absolutely certain that some low-end board doesn't have all of the connectors you want, and also whatever else, like, the thing is, your motherboard is mostly just a collection of connectors, right? Let's realistically, there's a CPU socket, like your motherboard's primary purpose is to connect your CPU to a memory, to a set of memory and a GPU and some permanent storage, as well as some USB as well as some like IO ports. That's the primary purpose of a motherboard, is to just act as a giant interconnect between, other devices. And so it's just like, really what you should figure out is like, what connectors do I want? And then, figure out which motherboard gets you those connectors as cheaply as possible. Then you might start considering like, hey, do I care about overclocking? Do I care about who makes my BIOS? Do I care about what kind of memory overclocking support I have? Because otherwise, like, you can just, like, there's not really much other reason to buy super high-end boards. Anyway. X570 Extreme. Man, I'm sitting in a really awkward position to shoot this video. It's not very comfortable. And after an hour, it really, like, I'm annoyed. So anyway, where were we? So yeah, Carbon's dumb. X570 Extreme 4. Do I even care? What does this do? And the rear I/O is not great. I'm not sure. Like, isn't this like, oh, I guess you get 8 SATA ports for... Well, no, because there's the Tough Pro. That does the same thing for cheaper, right? Yeah, cheaper. So the Tough Pro is sort of the winner of the $220 motherboard category, as far as I'm concerned. So good job, Asus. We've already talked about the B550 Taichi a bit. So yeah, at 230, that board is kind of neat. But unless you need the extra functions this offers, well, actually no. But at a $10 price difference, I might just go for the Taichi just because, like, you don't know that you won't someday decide that, hey, I actually do want whatever the hell the Taichi does that I can't think of right now. But actually, no, because this isn't X570. It's not like you're getting a bunch of M.2 slots. So actually, no, this is just dumb. Like, even here, it's just like, get a Tough Pro instead. It's just a better board because, like, you get, you still have only two M.2 slot. Well, right, no, this has the dual X8. So, you make your own choice. The dual X8, like, gives you the option to just adapt to, like, M.2 down the line later, so. Anyway, the Tomahawk, like, not a bad motherboard, right? Like, if you have one, I wouldn't, get rid of it, but, like, I don't feel like it does anything that the Tough Pro doesn't do, and the Tough Pro is a bit cheaper. I guess if you prefer MSI BIOS to get Asus BIOS or something like that, it might make sense to get this instead. Like, you have the internal Type-C, which I believe that, yeah, also has internal Type-C. So, yeah, it's just like, this is cheaper. It seems to do all the same things. I don't know why you would get the Tomahawk at this point. And actually, there's a lot of people who are like, hey, Buildzoid, I'm going to buy a Tomahawk. And I'm just like, why? And they're like, well, I have a GPU, one SSD, and a mouse and a keyboard. And I'm like, and you can't do that on a B550 motherboard. Why? It's like, I've not heard of B550. It's like, oh, well. B550 Gaming Edge. 230. Is this board supposed to be 230? That seems way too expensive. Yeah, it's not supposed to be 230, so I guess it's out of stock. Yeah, it is. At 190 normally. Why would I pay $190 for a B550 board? Right, because like at $190, like we're approaching the X570 Tough Plus, which is just kind of the most like I consider the X570 Tough Plus the sort of the baseline X570 board, unless ASRock can convince me otherwise with the Steel Legend, which I kind of doubt, mostly because it's an ASRock board. You do get 8 SATA ports, which you do also get on the Tough. The Tough has troubleshooting LEDs. How's the rear I/O on this? This need to go to the ASRock website, of course. Steel Legend X570. Weaker VRM, though. But again, if you're not running a 5950X, that really doesn't matter much. There's no BIOS flashback on either of them. What's the LAN? Intel 1 gig. Well, the Asus one has Realtek 1 gig, so pick your poison, I guess. I'm actually like, well, the lack of troubleshooting LEDs on this, because I'm pretty sure I'm like ASRock has had boards where they're like hidden down on the bottom edge and they're like super hard to see, but I'm pretty sure this doesn't have troubleshooting LEDs. So yeah, and it's not like it has an internal Type-C connector or anything, so no benefits there. But I like, okay, so solid option if you don't care too much about the VRM. Or ASRock's BIOS of the X570 Aorus Elite, which does have internal Type-C. Oh, so I guess this is why I don't recommend the Steel Legend. Though this is on a 4-layer PCB, so this thing's memory overclocking capabilities are really not great. But this does have 6 SATA ports, so like this is the thing, it's just like, okay, do you want 8 SATA ports or 6? Well, if you want 6, then, or if you don't care about SATA ports, this is fine. It also has the Type-C, which if you care about having internal Type-C, that's pretty neat. Memory overclocking wise, this is probably worse than, actually this should be worse for memory overclocking than both the Tough and the Steel Legend. And since this is a 4-layer PCB, this is going to be as low as like, if you're running 4 memory sticks on this, you might end up stuck at like 3600. So at this point, you're actually going to start noticing the memory overclocking impact of the memory topology, even like in like day-to-day usage. But you're like still, if your goal is to run 3600 on 128 gigs of RAM, that should still mostly work. And I say still should because I'm not 100% certain. But if you're looking for 3200 CL16, you're fine. Yeah, if you're one of those people who buys what I consider garbage RAM, then yeah, you're fine. It doesn't matter. And if you're only running 2 memory sticks, this is also fine. Though admittedly, this is what? The Elite Wi-Fi is 210, whereas the regular Elite. And the regular Elite is 195. So, yeah, would I get that over the Steel Legend? Probably, assuming you don't need a bunch of SATA ports. Would I get it over the Tough? Actually, wait a minute. This is like B550 feature set territory. Like, yeah, that's the thing. So why wouldn't you get the X570 Elite? Well, let me introduce you to the B550 Aorus Pro AC. So this board has 2 M.2 slots. It also has 6 SATA ports. And now I can't remember if you lose SATA ports to that M.2 slot. I don't think you do. I think you lose a PCIe slot to the SATA ports. We're going to have to check. Man, isn't that super, like, I wonder, like, this is the thing, is just, like, there's a, like, this is a whole issue of just, like, the chipset not having enough bandwidth. It's just, like, and it's not even, like, bandwidth coming from the CPU. It's, like, coming out of the chipset. Where it's just, like, I have no idea how many, like, how the SATA ports work out off the top of my head. PCIe 16 integrated into chipset. Supports, wait, X2? What? X2 slot shares with SATA 3, 4, and... Okay, no, so that's SATA 3 speed, but 4, 5 connectors 4 and 5. PCIe slot will be unavailable if you use 4 and 5. Yeah, because it's SATA 3, 4 and SATA 3, 5. Oh, man. Anyway, and I don't think the X570 board has that limitation. Or does it? Man, this is not something I pay attention to. This is why I hate doing motherboard roundups for Gamers Nexus. There's just so many random little details about motherboards that, like, I don't care. I'm just going to use the SATA ports. I couldn't give less of a damn what the M.2 does. Or the PCIe slot. Well, actually, I do care about the missing PCIe slots, potentially, but... Okay, so this is fine. So X570 does have the advantage that you can use all of the SATA ports and all of the PCIe slots. Cool. And there's not much of a difference between, like, the $190 X570 boards and the $180, you know, B550s. Actually, this is $170 right now. Oh, that's the old version. Where's the V2? Oh, the V2's not listed. Oh, no. That sucks. Am I blind, or is the V2 not listed? Both are very possible. I don't think the V2 is listed. Yeah. Or, like, there's a chance that some of the retailers don't make a distinction between the V1 and V2. And so they'll just list the V2 under the V1 boards, which is just like, well, that's great. That's awesome. What else is there? Oh, X570 Phantom Gaming. Why am I looking at the back? I don't like the rear I/O. There, that's my thoughts on that one. I kind of want to get this video over with, if you can't tell at this point. I really don't think ITX X570 boards make a bunch of sense unless you absolutely need to have 2 4.0 SSDs. Though I guess at $190 this isn't too bad. And it does have Thunderbolt 3. So I guess if you're looking for that, that makes, you know. But that's not the kind of thing, is like, if you want Thunderbolt 3, why are you even asking me if I recommend a certain motherboard? It's not like you have that many options. It's like, if you want an ITX Thunderbolt 3 motherboard, this is it. Right? You don't need to ask for my approval, because it's like, well, what else are you going to buy? The non-existent X570 motherboard with ITX X570 motherboard with Thunderbolt 3 that isn't this one? Because that's the thing. If you have a very specific, like, requirement in terms of features for your motherboard, you don't really, like, you're not going to have to do much searching, because there's going to be, like, 1 or 2 boards that does exactly what you want. And if you have no idea what you're buying and why, then, yeah, I guess, you know, It's a bit overwhelming. But that's the thing is like figure out what you want your motherboard to do. Because if you don't, yeah, there's kind of too many options. You know, I think I'm going to cut it off at the $150 mark because below the $150 mark, other than this, there's just a bunch of kind of miserable boards. Or, oh wait, no, I guess we'll cut it off at 140 then. Because, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that. Or that. Or that. Well, actually, no, I do want to talk about that. So since we're on it, don't overclock. Actually, a 6-core might be fine. But anything else, like, please don't. Like, this is not a heatsink. That is not gonna, like, yeah. This is a motherboard that I really want to mess with from the perspective of, like, I wonder if you can upgrade the VRM heatsink to stop overheating. Like, by just, like, taping smaller heatsinks on top of it. But this is not a motherboard I would actually consider purchasing as a serious purchase because there are, like, the thing is, like, once you get to a motherboard like this, it's like, you're not going to overclock on it. It only has one M.2 slot, also. So at this point, you could literally just buy an A520 chipset ITX, which costs you $30 less. Admittedly, you don't have PCIe 4.0 support anymore, but again, like, depends how much you care about that. If you absolutely need PCIe 4.0, yeah, this is the cheapest ITX that gives you PCIe 4.0. Knock yourself out, I guess. please just don't overclock on it. Again, it's just like if you have a specific feature request, like specific features in mind, then it's very easy to choose a motherboard because you can just sort from cheapest to most expensive and then go and then click on boards that is like, does this look like it has the ports I need? X570-P. Like, this is, again, like, with X570, you do get the advantage that you can plug in all the SATA, plug in all the M.2, plug in all the PCIe, I guess. There's no troubleshooting LEDs on this, which is kind of annoying. VRM's capable of running even a 5950X, maybe with a slight overclock, depending on how much airflow you have. Rear I.O. could be worse, actually. Could be worse. That's not that bad. Though I'm not sure I would consider it... Oh, I guess they're referring to the USB 3.2 Gen 2s. That's such a stupid port name. Like, why isn't it just called USB 4 or something? Well, let's see. So if you're running your CPU at stock, this is fine. The biggest problem with this board is the VRM is really underpowered compared to the other motherboards at this in this price range. But you do get troubleshooting LEDs. I believe it's on a 6-layer PCB. Actually, we can tell. We can tell. We can see it. I will show you a very secret technique for figuring out how many layers your MSI motherboard has, assuming that I get lucky. So MSI and Gigabyte both. Actually, I've not figured out how to do it on ASRock boards yet, but on Asus boards, I don't think they have it labeled. Or I don't think they have it labeled on all of them. But MSI, I'm pretty sure, labels it on all of their boards. So you can just go to the gallery and get the biggest picture of the... How very sneaky of you. So, normally, down in this area of an MSI motherboard, there's a little label with how many layers, like for the different layers of the board. They've put the M.2 SSD cover over it. But they didn't do it here, and yeah, that looks like just 2 squares. So, well, actually, with this board, it's even easier. Like, look, can you see memory traces? Because I can see memory traces, and that means, yeah, this is... We could also just look at the memory speed supported. Detail up to 4400. Yeah, this is 4. Like, there's a reason this board is currently going super cheap. Which this isn't even super cheap, but I have seen some people find this board for like around $120-ish. And it's like, well, at that point, I guess it's not that bad. But at 170, it is bad. Like, please don't. It doesn't have any of like the... Well, I guess you get the connectivity of X570, but you don't get any other benefits. And the same goes for this thing. this is actually just kind of worse than the Gaming Plus. Tough Plus, still a solid choice, right? For like a low-end X570 board, this is still a solid choice, especially if you can find it on some of these deep discounts that it hits occasionally. What else do we have? B550 Velocita. If I'm not mistaken, this is the same board as the Steel Legend. Also, again, those M.2 slots, PCIe slots, that's an X4. And the funny thing with these is like they do give you a postcode, but unfortunately at this price point they're worse at memory overclocking than their competitors, like a Tomahawk, because this is on a 6-layer PCB. So this is a better memory overclocker. I just don't like the rear I/O on this, but hey, if you don't care about USB ports, this is a great motherboard. You do care about having a bajillion USB ports in the back, it's not so great. That's kind of how that works with a lot of the boards. But I really like the Aorus Pro because bajillion USB ports, 6-layer PCB, great memory overclocking capabilities, and this is the non-V2, so this doesn't have the Type-C connector. But yeah, now this video has gone completely off the rails. So Phantom Gaming Velocita doesn't really make a lot of sense, nor does the Extreme 4, because these are both basically recolors of the B550 Steel Legend, which is just cheaper. And, you know, like the Steel Legend, basically, it doesn't have the buttons. It still has the useful part, which is the postcode. Unfortunately, they're all 4-layer PCBs with just not like for a 4-layer PCB, these are really good memory overclockers, but they do still lose to 6-layer boards. And, you know, like, if you want 6-layer boards at this price range, I mean, you've got the Tough, as far as I know, but that's a 6-layer that will basically be on par with the 4-layer Steel Legend. So yeah, if you're choosing between these two, then go with the Steel Legend. But the B550 Plus, I believe, is 6 layers, which we can check. Let's go check. It's the best way to do this. B550 Plus specs. Oh, just 4,600. Well, that's depressing. Yeah. Just 3,600 and 4,600 and 4,800. Yeah, that's kind of low. I guess they didn't bother to do anything for that board. Anyway, B550 Tomahawk is 6 and costs like 180 and has troubleshooting LEDs. It doesn't have a postcode, which, you know, would be better than having LEDs, but it's like, what would you rather have? A motherboard that tells you that why your memory isn't over, like why your memory settings aren't booting, or a motherboard that just boots your memory settings and doesn't tell you why they do work? Right? Like that's basically the difference. And admittedly, the postcode can be very helpful in some scenarios, but like most of the time, especially on AM4 in my experience, the postcode isn't that helpful. It's a bit better than having just LEDs, but it's not that much better. Especially for like normal users. So, yeah, I'd rather have a board that just boots the damn settings instead of telling me, hey, you're stuck on F9, and it's just like, well, that's very unhelpful. This is garbage. Actually, no, I stand by that. I wouldn't buy this. Not for $170. I guess the logic for ASRock here is that it's the cheapest board with Wi-Fi 6, but actually, you know what? No, just don't, because this also has Wi-Fi 6, and I think this technically has slightly worse memory overclocking capabilities, and it doesn't have any troubleshooting LEDs, but it does have a way better VRM. And if you're going to run a 5950X, then, you know, oh, this only has 4 SATA ports. Yeah, so that's actually a pretty big downside, I guess. Depends on your, again, depends on what exactly you need, but I would probably go with a board with a proper VRM instead of the board that happens to have 6 SATA ports. 8. That's actually a lot. So I guess, depends. Do you want Wi-Fi 6 and 8 SATA ports, or do you want Wi-Fi 6 and the ability to overclock a 5950X? That's kind of the choice that's going on right there. What else do we have? X570 Gaming X from Gigabyte. Just don't, as far as I'm concerned. Like, does this even make sense price-wise? 170. I would, like, I'd just go for the tough instead. Like, yeah, it's... Yeah, that's 170 versus 180, get the tough. The tough is so much better. Like, that's such a massive upgrade that $10 makes it absolutely worth it. Though I think that's because the tough's on sale, isn't it? Yeah, because the tough is supposed to be like 180-ish, 190, but the tough goes on sale very, very regularly. Um, so, yeah. Anyway. Oh, there's also the Aorus Elite V2, which doesn't have the AX version just yet. Okay, well. So the Aorus Elite, the B550 Aorus Elites are basically a whole lot of VRM attached to a 4-layer PCB, so the memory overclocking isn't particularly spectacular, and you only get 4 SATA ports. But, you know, if you absolutely need support for, like, heavy 5950X overclocking, and you're only running 2 memory sticks, this isn't really gonna, like, you're not gonna have a problem with the memory overclocking on these. So what else is there? That's the Elite. Mortar. Ooh, this is actually a cool board. So this is like the best MATX overclocking board. 4-layer PCB, unfortunately. So again, the memory overclocking just isn't going to go very far. Unfortunately, the rear I/O is the opposite of what I like to see. We pull up the B550. Yeah, MSI's website is just special. Let's just put it that way. Actually, there's a Wi-Fi and non-Wi-Fi version. Let's just look at the Wi-Fi version, right? For whatever reason, the Wi-Fi version comes in white. I'm not sure why they decided to do that, but anyway, what I like about this board is internally you get Type-C, you get 6 SATA ports, you get your... You actually can plug in both of your PCIe slots, even if you have a triple slot GPU, or even a 2.2 slot GPU, right? Like, because as soon as your GPU is not quite 2 slots, you're probably not plugging in anything into that last slot. Or, well, you wouldn't be able to plug anything into the 1X on this board. And there's a lot of MATX boards where that's actually a real concern. For example, the Aorus Pro P, right? That's 3 slots, like, that's 2 slot spacing right there. So if you have a GPU that's more than 2 slots, like, you're just not going to get to use that X16 at the bottom. Not that it runs at X16, but, you know, like, you might want to use that PCIe slot for something. Well, you can't. Now, the downside to the mortar is, look, it's the rear I/O of the Godlike all over again. Right? Like, you get 5 USB ports, Type A, which I find very upsetting. But to my understanding, most people don't have a bajillion webcams that they need to plug in, so, you know, that's mostly just me. But yeah, other than, like, internally, very solid configuration of the motherboard. Also, the best VRM on an MATX B550. Or actually just MATX anything, because it's not like the X... There was there even any X570 MATX boards? Oh, no, I think there was, like, one from ASRock, and that one isn't particularly great anyway, so, yeah. Like, there. We've done the Elite, we've done the Pro, Gigabyte B550 Aorus Pro. Like, I just straight up like the Pro. This for this price point, like, you get great, like, from an overclocking perspective, I'm a huge fan of this board, because you get great memory overclocking support, you have troubleshooting LEDs, rear I/O is, in my opinion, solid. So it's kind of like one of my go-to motherboards for AM4 in general. The B550 Aorus Pro V2. Like, this is a rear I/O I'm a fan of, and then the memory overclocking on this. Like, because this is on the same memory topology as the Master, but it doesn't have the dual BIOS. So, yeah, what else we have? The Tough, we've already... Wait, no, that's the B550 Tough. We've already looked at the B550 Tough, right? Yeah. So, again, like, it's unfortunate, like, at this... Wait, for 155, that's actually reasonable. Is it supposed to be 155, or is it on a deep discount? It's supposed to be 170. Yeah, for 170, I'd rather have the Pro, right? Because the Pro normally is, well, the Pro MSRP is 180, whereas the MSRP on this is 170, and I'd rather spend the $10 and get a Pro instead of this. Though it's not like the rear I/O on this is particularly bad. It's actually quite decent. It's just like, this is a worse memory overclocker. Though you do get color-coded troubleshooting LEDs. So I had to, depends on your preferences at this point. If you don't care about memory overclocking, then it really doesn't matter which one you go for. If you do care, then the Pro's better. Oh, I can't wait for all the comments under the video from people who are like, does memory overclocking make a difference in games? Look at the name of the freaking channel and consider and then consider how much I probably care about if memory overclocking makes a performance difference in whatever game it is that you play. And also, I'd assume it would kind of depend on which exact game you're playing as to how much effect memory overclocking has. Oh, whoa, this thing is cheap. Oh, yeah, it's on a super deep discount, isn't it? Yeah, this at 155 this board unfortunately doesn't make a bunch of sense. Like, it's not bad in terms of feature set, but like, it's a 4-layer PC. Well, actually, I wonder if this technically has an edge over the other 4-layer boards. The VRM on this runs hotter though. Not even because the components in the VRM are bad. It's just like ASRock's heat sinks and the fact that this yeah, it's mostly down to ASRock's choice of heat sinks, as far as I can tell. Like, this is not significantly, like, the actual power stages and stuff, that's not a significant out. Oh, actually, it might be because they run the VRM at 600 kilohertz on these boards. Because the B550 Steel Legend runs 600 kilohertz VRM frequency, which is kind of high. Not exactly, like, I'm not sure that it's definitely suboptimal for efficiency, but generally speaking, for the cheaper power stages, you want to run them at 300. Or at least not, or maybe like 500 or 400 or something. So running them at 600 is kind of like, really? And it's not a huge difference, but it could shave off a couple degrees, so. Yeah, anyway, 6 SATA ports. So this is a very similar, like, it doesn't have the internal Type-C that you'd get on the Mortar, right? But this does have a better rear I/O than the Mortar. Much better rear I/O, but you don't get BIOS flashback, you only get clear CMOS. So it's kind of like, like, I'd prefer, but I think this is a hard choice. It depends what you want, right? Like, it really depends on what you want. If you don't plan to run a 5950X in your M80X board, then you're fine. With a Steel Legend, and you get more USB ports in the back. And if you don't care about the internal Type-C, well, you don't have one. This doesn't affect you. You don't care. Right? So anyway, I feel kind of done with this at this point. I think I've gone through all the boards I really care about going through. Oh, I guess Aorus Pro PM. Solid. Well, I think I mentioned this board at the start. Like, this is technically capable of, like, PBO should be doable. Like, this should be similar in terms of VRM to the Steel Legend. Because this is actually, I think, exactly the same power stages with, I think, the same number of power. Actually, no, I think the Steel Legend is 8+2, whereas this is 10+2 power stages, not phases. This is a 5-phase for V-Core. And actually, I think the Steel Legend is... I shouldn't be saying so much I think. The thing is, I also don't care. It's like, I've lost interest a long time ago at this point. This video is too long. I guess the benefit of doing this as a live stream was that people would suggest boards and I could then rip into their choice of motherboard for being too expensive or too bad or whatever. And now it's like I have to freaking slog through all these boards where it's just like, I just want to, like, there's some solid options in the low end, but a lot of the other boards are like this. Like, why does this exist? Why does it cost so much? Why is this a thing? This is terrible. Please avoid. This actually arguably kind of makes sense. Maybe. Like, depend if you want the Wi-Fi. Why does this exist? Well, it's 115. Like, these are just boards that I don't like looking at. Anyway. Yeah, I wouldn't get, as I mentioned, wait, UD. This is even cheaper. The thing is, I remember testing this board and being very unimpressed with the VRM performance for many reasons. Not just the thermals, like, there are other things as well. Right, does this only have one M.2 slot? Okay, this is just stupid. Why would you have an X570 board with one M.2 slot? Yeah, no, this is just dumb. I don't know why this exists. 150. No, it doesn't make sense for 150. What's the MSRP Newegg? 160. Still doesn't make sense. You can get a B550 with more M.2 slots. Like, yeah. So I'm basically done here. Or not even basically done. I'm very done. Like, we've gone through all the boards I care about. I guess for the outro, I'll just point out some of my favorites. So, the Creation is a cool motherboard. Like, look at this rear I/O and tell me that you don't wish every motherboard could have a rear I/O like this. The Unify is, like, if you want a a good overclocking X570 motherboard and don't care about SATA, I really like this board. This is great. If you don't care about overclocking, but you do just want all of the features of the X570 chipset, this exists. Right? This literally has all of the features. Like, you have all the SATA ports, all the M.2s, all the PCIe X8s. I guess you don't have the most flooded rear I/O, but at this price point, you can't really get that anyway. What else is there? I'm annoyed that we don't have the Unify X anywhere here. Because, like, the Unify X memory overclocking-wise is amazing. Like, if you're literally just into overclocking, the Unify X is so cool. Otherwise, I would probably get an X570 Unify instead, because the Unify X for B550 is the same price as the X570 Unify. And, like, MSI was like, yeah, we're going to justify the $300 price point with 4 M.2 slots. And I'm just like, but this has 3. And if I buy an expansion card, I have 5. Right, like, this can literally have 5 M.2 SSDs, whereas the B550 motherboard is never going above 4. Also, the fourth one is PCIe 3.0, whereas this could be 5 4.0 drives. Oops. So, what other boards? So, yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to say the Tomahawk Wi-Fi, which is a super popular board, I consider it dethroned by the Tough Pro at this point. Like, this does everything it does, and it does it cheaper. So, and it has more SATA ports. So, yeah, it's just like, so Tough Pro, cool board for 220. This, I'm impressed. At 220, that's a cool board. I don't think the $220 price point as a motherboard price point makes a ton of sense, but it's a cool board. Oh, I should have included the B550 Vision. Where is the B550? Oh, right, because it's super overpriced right now, because it's out of stock. But this is like, I need X8s, and I need postcode, and I need memory overclocking. This is a cool board for that, if you can find it for the MSRP, because it's supposed to cost 260. It's not supposed to cost 400. How is it at 400? Who the hell pays 400 for a B550 Vision D? What is wrong with that person? What else do we have? Oh, I guess I skipped this board, didn't I? The thing is, this is like X570 pricing with B550 features, which again is just like a board that doesn't make sense, in my opinion. I guess some people might be like, oh, it's got 2.5 gig LAN, but I can get 2.5 gig LAN for 180 on the MSI B550 Tomahawk or the B550 Aorus Pro, or doesn't even the Tough from Asus B550 have 2.5 gig? So yeah, this is, oh, and I'm not outroing the video properly at this point. Okay, we need to actually outro. So anyway, so cool boards. What? Where did the Creation go? Oh yeah, so Creation, because the rear I/O is awesome. Pcie, because all of the internal connectors. Unify because this this is this is a great board to work with, and it has all of the big X570 features in my opinion. Mainly the M.2 slots. This because even more overclocking, but cheaper. Like this is a very similar feature set to me. This is like it's like the feature set of the Unify, but with better overclocking. And like the VRM on this is significantly weaker than what you get on the Unify, but this is still capable of running a 5950X, so it's not like it's the end of the world. You know, and if you're just doing PBO, then it doesn't matter. What else do I want to point out? I wanted the Pro V2, but we don't have that on the list here, which is annoying. Is it on the second page, maybe? Aorus Pro V2. Yeah, so this board I'd like to highlight as just awesome overclocking B550 motherboard. And I say overclocking very specifically. Dark Hero. Actually, we should include the Dark Hero. It's a cool board. It's just a real shame that I haven't had a chance to test it. And when I say cool board, I don't necessarily think it's the best memory overclocker. I don't also, like, yeah, as far as I know, it's not the best memory overclocker. It's good, but not like, they're, you know, not best. The main reason I find this board interesting is the dynamic like the boost to static overclocking functionality. That's really cool. And then I like the 8 Sata ports are nice. But, you know, the Pcie does that too. And does it for less money. Where is it? Where's the B550 Pro? Oh yeah, this. So, fun fact, the motherboard currently recording this video is very similar to this. Because I'm on an X470 Gaming Pro Carbon, which is like, I think it's the exact same VRM as this in terms of actual, like, MOSFETs, but different heatsink, different inductors, and that's, I think, it. If I remember correctly, that's it. Like, it's the same controller, same MOSFETs, same drivers, and then the inductors on this one are different, and the even the capacitors are the same. And they're both 4-layer PCBs, and they both have troubleshooting LEDs. But this one, like, the Carbon has 1 gig Intel LAN, whereas this has 1 gig Realtek. Anyway, but yeah, this is like sort of the baseline B550 motherboard for high core count CPUs, in my opinion. Any other boards I wanted to point out? Not really, no. I kind of like it, so yeah, like Creation, because this, Unify, because it's the freaking Unify. It's like great all-around X570 motherboard, great connectivity X570 motherboard. Actually, this rear I/O is also pretty cool. The Vision's rear I/O. It gets Thunderbolt, and it has dual 1 gig Intel. So, yeah, this is like almost my perfect motherboard, except personally I would have preferred more SATA ports. It's like my main problem with this board is just like, where did all my SATA ports go? Anyway, this is a solid, like, this is a, like, this dethrones the Tomahawk as the best $200-ish, $220-ish motherboard. This might make sense eventually. Like, I still don't think this is a motherboard everybody should be buying. Actually, even if the dynamic OC, like, dynamic static OC thing was incredible, like, I don't think everybody should be buying it. But yeah, it's a board that I'm very interested in testing. Unfortunately, it's also $400. Like, I just feel like the price point there is just such an issue, because it's just because the main concern I have is like the boost to static OC system. I don't think it's gonna gonna give you a big enough performance advantage to justify the price. And then on the rest of the feature set, like, is this going to be 33% more performant than a Unify? Right? Because as far as I know, this is a $400 board. And it's like, yeah, well, if this isn't 33% faster than an X570 Unify, then where did all my money just go? Or is it, or even worse, is it like, is it 55, is it 33% faster than a Pcie? And again, like the Pcie can PBO, the Unify can PBO, like all of these boards can PBO just fine. And there's just no way the static overclock is doing 33% more performance than just straight PBO. Like, it's just because the thing is, in order to hit 33% more performance, you would need to outclock the Unify running PBO by 30%. Like, you'd have to run 33% more core clock. Like, and so it's just like, yeah, so that's not going to happen. So, like, this is a cool feature if you really want to tinker with your CPU a lot. But for day-to-day usage, it doesn't actually make any bloody sense. Right? Like, it's just never gonna, it's never gonna give you the performance gain that big. Like, because here's the thing, on PBO, if you're running Cinebench, you normally, on a 5950X, it'll run like 4.4-ish gigahertz. Like, if you can run 4.6 static, that's like, how much is that? It's like 5% or something? Let's pull up a calculator. 4.6, 4.4. It's like 5%. Spend 33% more money for 5% more performance in multi-threaded workloads only. So, yeah, like, I think this would have been if Asus had this feature on like a lot of different motherboards, I think it would have been like an actual seriously good thing, like a major like factor in choosing a motherboard. But because it's on this insanely ridiculous, like insanely expensive X570 board, it's like, no, right? Just like, but why? Like, why would I spend? Because at that point, it's kind of like, I get, yeah, there's going to be some people who just want absolutely every single percentage point out of their system. But like I personally, my daily system is overclocked. It is not overclocked to within 1% of its max capabilities, just because I can't be bothered with that much like dialing in on my personal system. And so that's why I really don't see the appeal of having the boost to static transition system. Because like, are you seriously gonna like dial in the static thing to be that much better than PBO? Anyway, so yeah, Unify's cool. This is cool. Also very cool. This is really cool. Especially at like 260. This is a very neat motherboard, assuming you don't care about the SATA ports, which, I mean, for SATA ports, and like the thing is that first M.2 slot is off of the, actually we should check that. Because I've actually thought about it, like if like maybe I could just go, because I've considered sort of buying a Vision or something, because I really want an alternative to the Master for memory overclocking. It's like the dual BIOS on the Master is just so annoying. Also, I do want the X8, like, because I'm basically looking at this board like, oh, it'll be great at memory overclocking, and I can run Crossfire and SLI on it, and then when I'm done with it, I could maybe like shove it into my daily system, and the only real concern would be that I would have one SATA port left remaining when I do that, because right now I already have 3 SATA drives, but I wouldn't necessarily be like, if my motherboard forced me into having to like expanding my further storage with M.2s, I'd be kind of okay. I wouldn't necessarily care. Though I'm not sure how like expensive high capacity M.2 SSDs are compared to SATA. Because again, with like SSDs, I primarily just want more storage, not faster storage, just more. So I guess I could maybe get a PCIe to SATA card into that bottom PCIe slot, depending on how the wiring works out. So let's check that. So, no, that's graphics, expansion slots. Integrated to, shares bandwidth, M.2B. Oh, okay, so you can't use that one. And it is a X4 slot. So I wonder if I could just convert that X4 into more SATA ports, and then I'd be fine. Because I need the X8 connected to a, like, my capture card hates chipsets for some reasons. So Yeah. I need the X8 for my capture card in my daily. Oh, so, wait. Quad crossfire, two-way crossfire. Doesn't mention SLI here, but if you look at the key features... Where was it? Oh, I guess... No, it was the B550E from Asus. Asus has the SLI license. This just has the X8 X8. Anyway. Still, like, I don't care about SLI licenses. Actually, no, I do, because I wanted to run SLI. Damn it. Or I guess I could get the B550E. Especially since in Europe, like, the B550E is really cheap. Actually, well, if for some reason you've managed to sit here till the end of this disaster of a video, let me know in the comments below if I should get a B550E. Because in Europe, it's super cheap right now. And I could, like... How's the memory over... Actually, I do care. Let's check the B550E is good at memory overclocking. Where is it? I am blind. I've confirmed that. There it is. Because now I'm like, is it good at RAM? It's... Wait. Pro. I'm pretty sure that includes APUs. And if that includes APUs, then that is very disappointing. But what's actually this... Like, well, no, this isn't necessarily disappointing. This, on the other hand, is. That's really like, what? Why? Why is it so slow? So I guess I'm just going to have to run the X570 godlike. Anyway, tough is cool. This is cool. This is cool. There. Done with the video. So I guess, sorry for wasting your time. I guess you can like, share, subscribe if you want to waste even more time on my channel in the future. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon. There's a link to the link. There's a link to the Patreon down in the description. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. There's a link to that down in the description below as well. And that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.